Yeah, 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 now let's go. Do you hear me now? 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 1, 2, 3. Wow! Let your motor run around, round. So ready, better now than ever. Oh, so original. One more time, now let's go. Do you hear me now? 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 So original. I'ma turn it up and then I'm gonna take a pic. I can make you wanna go, never make it out.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special discussion about Generation on HBO Max as a part of the OutFronts presented by OutFest. I'm Ariana and Mitchell from GLAAD, and I'm joined today by all of these beautiful faces. Let's name them off one by one. Zelda Barnz, co-creator, executive producer, writer. I mean, her mind, are you kidding me? Welcome to this conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited.
I'm excited as well. Let's go to Daniel Barnz, who is your dad, one of your dads, co-creator, executive producer, writer, and director. Daniel, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Okay, we're all still learning Zoom, to be quite honest. I'm going to Zelda's other dad, who is so amazing, Ben Barnz, executive producer. Thank you so much for being here.
Thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having us.
And so let's go to the cast. Martha Plimpton, who plays Megan. Look at this cute little yellow beret. I can't get over it.
May we. Thank you for
Of
having
course.
me.
No, of course. Chloe E, who plays Naomi. Hi.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Of course. And Nava Mau, who plays Anna. Thank you so much for being here. So here's what I would love to discuss in this conversation, because I think Generation is a show that I was like, where has this been all of my life? And I think as Generation prepares to return for the second half of its inaugural season, we're here to discuss the themes of chosen family, including how the show depicts intergenerational conversations and diverse family structure, and how these two different generations involved in making the series have experienced queer representation throughout their lives. So let's start from the beginning. Zelda, I'm coming for you. I honestly still can't believe this show was conceived when you were 15 after coming out. That is not what I was doing when I was 15. Talk to us a little bit more about why this show was important for you and your family to create.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely think that I felt when I was realizing I was queer and coming out that a lot of media had very specific representation for queer people. Specifically, there's a lot of coming out storylines, a lot of stories of queer torture and queer like pain. And I really wanted to kind of see something that just celebrated queer joy. And I was finding that kind of hard to find in the media that I was interacting with when I was 15. And so I had this idea to kind of create something that just felt like very queer and very authentic to queer people. And yeah, I kind of just brought that idea to my parents, and they were really supportive and excited. And we kind of went from there.
I think that's so interesting, right? Because Ben, what was the feelings that came up for you when you all got this green light about this show and kind of starting this new journey with Zelda and Daniel?
Shock and awe. I think, you know, when we started this, we really honestly felt like it was we were just excited to introduce her to our world, right? And to show her what we did and how we did it and how you take an idea and then create from that a pitch, and then you go and you hopefully sell the pitch, and then never thinking it was going to keep going and going and going. So I think we started with just the hope that we could sort of introduce her to ourselves and our world, and the fact that we got to make it and make an entire season and are here talking to you is beyond our wildest dreams. Truly.
Daniel, what came up for you? I mean, this is a family affair for sure. Like, I'm honestly shocked about it. It's never, in my opinion, I feel like I've never heard of this ever.
Yeah. By the way, me too. I mean, the idea of doing something like this with my parents is so far afield. Like, we didn't have these conversations. We didn't talk like this. There was like, none of this was true in my family. And I think, to what Ben and Zelda said, it was just this kind of amazing opportunity to, in the context of talking about the show, also kind of talk about our lives. And where it began was with Zelda and her younger brother, Dashiell, who's also queer, talking about what their experience was like, which was so different from how Ben and I grew up and how we were seeing the world and, what we were thinking about and seeing on TV and film. And so out of those kind of conversations, some of which were like really poignant and some of which were just hilariously funny, came the idea to explore sort of this kind of intergenerational difference. And as part of that, just to really celebrate something that we saw in Zelda and Dashiell's lives, which was this kind of openness and this ability to walk through life with a little bit less fear than Ben and I had experienced when we were growing up, that really was very inspiring to all of us.
I can only imagine. Martha, what was it like working on this show to become this vision of a parent from Zelda's perspective?
Well, it was really exciting, actually. It was really exciting because I think this character could have been very different than she is. And it's funny. I mean, you'd think that being written from an adult perspective or from a remove, that you'd see sort of a more complete character, but actually it's kind of the opposite. It's because this show comes from a young person's perspective or a younger person's perspective, that I think she's less afraid to really look at the things in a parent that doesn't handle things well. I think there's an honesty there that maybe, regular adults, meaning adults wouldn't want to touch. They'd be sort of, they'd want to make it more sympathetic. They'd want to make it more sort of flat. Do you know what I mean? Or they'd want to make it a little more, evil in a weird way. You know what I mean? They'd want to go that way too. I think what Zelda and also Daniel have done is really sort of create a character that's just as complex as the kids in the show, that's just as scared and freaked out and, multifaceted as anyone else. It's really nice, actually. It's really nice.
I love that. And I also think this show has done such a good job at kind of debunking a lot of common misconceptions about Gen Z. Zelda, why was that important for you to make sure this show was doing that?
A lot of reasons. I definitely think there are a lot of, similarly to millennials, I think there is a lot of media saying statistics about Gen Z that seem to represent all of Gen Z that might not necessarily actually be that specific or that true. And I do think that, we're called the iGen, which I think is, it's just yes, we did grow up with iPhones, but that feels so judgmental. It feels like putting a judgment on us for something that we simply are not in control of. And there are so many little reputational things about Gen Z like that, where people refer to us as the iGen and they say we're always on our phones and we're always on TikTok. And that's not our whole lives. That is a piece of our lives. And it's also an important piece of our lives. That's part of our language. It's how we communicate. But I don't think that things like that deserve all the judgment that they always get. So it was really important to me to represent Gen Z in a fair and truthful way rather than from a judgmental perspective.
Yeah, Chloe, did you think about that as well, those misconceptions about Gen Z? Because you kicked off the show. The premiere was you and a lot of my friends who are millennials. Now, I'm a cuss baby. Like, I'm a millennial, low-key and Gen Zer. So, I'm still young. But I feel like a lot of my friends were like, we see this character, we see Naomi. What is this show? Did you think about that when you're kind of channeling who Naomi is?
Saying, what is this show? Yes, 100%. Yeah, and it was just like when I first got the script and the audition, and I was like, what the heck? This girl she's having a baby in a like, she doesn't know, like, that doesn't happen. I think that was the first director read I had too. Daniel was like, do you have any questions? I was like, yeah, why doesn't she know she's having a baby? That doesn't happen. He's like, it does happen. Check it out. And so, yeah, but I wanted to say something really quick about what Zelda was saying and piggyback. I do feel the same thing where it's like anytime someone asks like, oh, what generation are you? Or you say, I'm Gen Z. People often put such a negative connotation to that. Like, oh, like, you should have grown up during my time and when I had blah, 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 blah. And I think it is just such a different time. And it's so hard for so many different reasons. And growing up with the Kardashians or growing up on, you didn't have to be compared to your peers so up front and close 24/7 hour. It's just 24/7. And I think it's hard in different ways. And I think it should be shown and not judged and think like, oh, these privileged Gen Zers and their privileged like lives with the internet and getting around in Ubers. It's just different. And I think, of course, I can't really speak on the other generations. Maybe I'm just feeling a little like I have a chip on my shoulder. I'm like, I want to be equals with everyone. And like, it was hard for us too, but I don't know.
I think every generation, I mean, I will say, I do think like every young generation gets a little beat up on by older generations, but I do think Gen Z has gotten particularly beat up on because of the social media aspect. And one of the things that Zelda was really important to Zelda from the get-go was to say, let's present social media as a language. And sometimes, when you're using a language, you do bad things and you curse or you insult somebody. That doesn't make the language itself bad. And sometimes, particularly with queer youth, social media is like this invaluable tool. It forms community. It's a way to bring people together. If you're isolated, and looking for, a sort of, and I know we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but you're looking for a family, that social media can actually be kind of a tool. And so that was one thing that was so important to Zelda from the get-go, was how do we present social media as a language and not as good or bad, but just part of the way that people actually just speak in this generation.
Wow, I love that. I think that's so important. Nava, what role do you think your character plays in this chosen family that we see?
I think that Anna honestly ends up being kind of like a bridge. There's something about her that feels like she's written from an older generation. Like, when I think about her history, like she really came up in the clubs, and she, I think, has been connected to people in community who have been through the AIDS crisis. And I think that her immigrant background gives her a very different generational perspective to family and religion. And yet she has this youth, right? And she is tasked with taking care of these two children, and through Greta is able to meet all these kids, and she kind of, I think, seamlessly gets along with them. And so I really see her as being able to easily bridge between generations. Even though obviously she herself is not Gen Z. And I also am very not Gen Z, like, and I don't think I realized that until I was reading this script and was getting to know this cast. And I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely a thing. So yeah, that's how I see Anna.
I love that because for me, a character like Anna, there's so many layers and there's so many stories and perspectives just about her alone. What do you think this character does for the elevation of trans stories being told?
I mean, I think that it is so valuable that we get to see a trans woman be loved by her family, and to be so giving. Anna she's just like abundantly giving and is often in service to others. And I think that her playing that role in the other characters' lives is meaningful because we get to find value in a trans person that is beyond the way that trans people have been represented on screen over the history of film and television. So yeah, and she's also very stylish. And I think, you know what I mean? Like, yes, give us Orange County fashion icon. Like, yes.
Yes, I mean the earrings alone, by the way, I feel like are just like their own thing. I'm obsessed every time there's like a new Nava would show up with another set of earrings. I'd like that needs like an entire like close up in and of itself. But I will just say, because I know part of this is like kicking off the next block. There's a really interesting episode that comes up later, and I'm not going to give any spoilers, but it does bring together Megan and Anna into the same physical space. And it's really interesting to explore for both of these women what it looks like to be a kind of parent, and there are various things. And it's you know, I'm getting kind of goosebumps thinking about the performances that Nava and Martha deliver in this episode. They're really so exquisite, but to see that sort of like that contrast in these two women kind of struggling and figuring out how to be parents is so moving. And yeah, it's coming up.
No, I'm excited. I know what episode you're talking about because I've been grateful enough to be able to see it. But Martha, I think this is really a great segue to talk about your character, because knowing your past work and playing Megan must be miles away from your own personal connection to the LGBTQ plus community. So what drew you to her? Like, really, what was that moment for you like?
First of all, the writing of the first pilot episode, she was only in one scene or maybe two scenes, but I loved the writing of the whole show. And I loved the way these kids spoke and the way the issues in their lives or the dramas in their lives, you know, whether they be little or big, you know, whether one of them was finding out she was having a baby, or, do you know what I mean? Or, you know, just a kid being shy about, you know, liking another kid. I just really liked the writing. I really did. So a sight on scene, I was just like, great, I'll do it. I'm there. But I think as we went on and as I read more scripts and as, you know, I was not surprised to find that same quality of writing and insightfulness and empathy would also apply to Megan and to the other adults in the show. I was not surprised that there would be that kind of confusion and displeasure and also specificity about what she's going through. It's not just general, you know, queer fear. It's really specific, and it's specific to this woman and where this woman comes from, and her religion, which is very important to her, and her marriage. All these things are very, very specific. And in fact, I mean, I guess if we're talking about this one episode, without giving away any spoilers, I think it's really interesting the way, and Daniel, you just said it, the way Anna and Megan serve as counterpoints to one another, because Megan is not, if I may, for now, she does not feel naturally maternal,
Mm.
right? She really struggles with that. And it wouldn't even matter if her kids weren't, if one of her kids wasn't queer or what. She's not a person who has an easy time with that feeling, with that job. She's not a person who connects very well with her children. So, and yet Anna presents this incredibly warm, incredibly, like open-armed sort of love for the kids that she's caring for, and also in a way sort of she's adopted, i.e. chosen family, right? So I really like that counterbalance, the way the show is working on those kinds of concepts, and without, really driving it home or anything, but
Yeah, Zelda, I want to know, because obviously we're getting this really kind of conservative representation from Megan's character, but I want to kind of talk about the characters of color in this show, specifically Ariana and Nava. How are they bringing your vision to life? What were you pulling from to inform who these characters were?
Yeah, Ariana was a really interesting kind of character because, of course, I also have gay dads, and so we definitely wanted a character in there who had gay dads, and it was really fun to kind of write for her and have her in the first episode be this kind of really fun, kind of crazy out there character. And as the season kind of progressed, Nathania is amazing. She's a brilliant genius, and so we did kind of really get in there with kind of her more emotional moments. We learned the arc of her adoption story, for example, and so I definitely think that was a really fun character to play around with, and to kind of see her go from, in the pilot, this kind of funny, crazy, shocking character, to go all the way to somebody who is really empathetic and really kind and able to express so much emotion and be vulnerable, which isn't something I think you would necessarily expect from the pilot. And Nava's a brilliant genius, and Anna was so much fun to write for, just because she is it's what Martha said, she is so warm, and she is this kind of almost mama bear figure for these kids. She does just want to protect them all, and I think she wants to give them a kind of home and chosen family, because that's something that's so important to her.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that I'm going to be honest. So with Ariana's character, right, I was seeing this, coming of age Black girl who was adopted by her two gay dads. And I was like, oh, wow, she's low-key kind of homophobic, and she hides behind it, right? And I think that's really telling, about, one, her being a Black girl in this kind of predominantly white, area. And I was thinking, was there any conversations behind that? Because of course, there's those connections between you and your dads, but her kind of finding her identity even more separate outside of the group. Is that something we're going to see her character kind of evolve over time? Daniel, would you like to take that on?
Yeah, sure. I think, it is really funny with Ariana's character, because our household is very irreverent. And so, and I think her character was born out of that irreverence. And it is interesting to see how she has been received. And of course, as the creator, you're so protective of all of these characters. You love them so much. And so it's interesting to hear her termed as homophobic. Of course, she is homophobic, and she says these wildly homophobic things, but I don't feel like in her core, she really is. And I think she, like many of the teens in this show, are figuring out who they are, and there is a way that there's a bit of a shock value that kind of comes. And what is interesting about her arc is to see her allowing herself to be more vulnerable once she comes into the fold of this chosen family and all these sort of kids that she's hanging out with. There is a really, really beautiful episode that is coming up in its next block, which is solely Ariana, Naomi, and Delilah together. And it is the three of them together is so beautiful. They're so funny and so like heartrending at the same time. And there's this really nuanced exploration of female friendship. And I think that is one of the things that we were really interested in exploring for Ariana. What is it like to grow up in a predominantly, male household? And then, how do you then, navigate kind of female friendship and something that's kind of so important. So it's I don't know. I feel like I'm a little like the hacky guy who's like, there's this really cool episode coming up, but like there are these really cool episodes coming up, and that one in particular is just this really nuanced and beautiful exploration of female friendship.
Ben, do you feel the same way about, Nava and Ariana's characters and these characters as they develop? Do you kind of see where they're going, and where would you like them to go?
Wow, that's a hard question.
With
I think
the
just
top hitters.
listening to everybody speak, and to Martha's point, I think the thing that Daniel and Zelda have done so beautifully is that all of these characters are flawed, but all of them are empathetic. So I think that's what's sort of so fantastic about, you meet Ariana and she's so abrasive in the beginning and you think you know who this person is. And then you watch the first 8 episodes and where she lands at the end of the first block, you would have had no idea she was going there, nor did you have any idea of what she was wrestling with, who she was internally. And it's the same with Megan's character. It's the same with Nava's character. The beautiful thing about this show is you really do have to have a bit of patience with it and let it unfold. So I think when I think about, God willing, we get to keep going with these characters, I just want them, like all of us on this screen, the more you get to know people, the more layers you see. And that is where the beauty of the show lies, I think.
I agree, Martha.
I just want to quickly add that one of the amazing things about Ariana is that, and this is just from another actor or another character's perspective, my actor perspective, one of the amazing things about Ariana is that she seems to know exactly who she is the second you meet her, right? She seems to have all this confidence and all this brio and, all this willingness to say the most shocking thing and not be afraid. But isn't that such a common experience for so many people, even for queer people in our culture? It's a defense. It's a way of getting through the world. It's a way of, managing your fear, right? I mean, and that's one of the beautiful things about the writing on this show. I think Ariana is particularly brilliant. And I mean, Nathania is particularly brilliant at riding that line that I think everyone in the show, every character has that line somewhere, but Nathania is really brilliant at riding that line and not being afraid of it at all. I think she is brilliant.
I do too. And
that's all I wanted to say.
Oh, you're perfect. You're perfect. This is such a great conversation so far. When I even think about growth and the exploring of female relationships, Naomi's character, I feel like, is kind of finding her own chosen family between Ariana and Delilah. Chloe, can you talk about that? Because it kind of seems like oftentimes Naomi isn't seen by her actual family, so she has her girls.
Yeah, no, totally. Exactly what you said. I think it's being that age, you feel like your parents don't get you. And I think especially in Naomi's circumstances, her mom wants her to be this person and live by these rules and be this person. And I think Naomi's like, well, I'm not going to be that person, but I know I can go see my girlfriends and be and say what I want and feel loved. And I think that's the main thing, is just like feeling loved. And I think this show does such a good job, and especially with that episode that Daniel was talking about, you just see these girls who are having so much fun and loving each other so much. And it's so endearing, because I know when I had those friends at that age and having sleepovers and eating hot dog on a stick and going to the mall and just enjoying youth. And And I think even in the episodes that you've seen, I think it's at episode 5 where it's the characters are listening to music in the car and it's Frank Ocean and you're just feeling this energy and this vibe that you don't get from your actual family. And I think every family is different, and I'm sure like my family growing up, they were very loving and accepting, and I always said my family's my best friends because we just got along and we'd play games and I could say what I want and they're really open. But I know that's not the reality for a lot of people, and especially growing up in, I guess, in any time, you just feel like your family doesn't quite understand you. And I think the show does such a good job just showing, yeah, Naomi does feel most comfortable with her friends at home, and especially with the secret that everyone's trying to keep on the down low. It's like they can't even tell their parents what is going on because of the fear and the guilt and everything that would come from just telling the truth. And I think the show does a really good job with that.
Yeah, Zelda, can you talk about the twin sibling dynamic here? Because it seems like, one, it's very chaotic, but I think it's also, we see Naomi just end up always being, Nathan's ride or die at the end of the day. No matter how anything that kind of goes wrong, you see that. And I felt like that was such a beautiful character development about her. What were you trying to tell in their dynamics in that story of Nathan and Naomi?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely think that is kind of how sibling dynamics often go, where there is a lot of fighting and a lot of chaos, but then at the end of the day, they're always like really there for each other. And I definitely think with Nathan and Naomi, I think as twins, they are both kind of struggling to find like a sense of individuality. I mean, in the pilot, we do see Naomi come downstairs and Megan says something to her and she's like, I just heard you say the exact same sentence to Nathan. So Megan does kind of in a way treat them as a unit, and she like recycles lines to both of them. And it is just like, I think that the two of them are both really struggling to break free from this like twin identity, but at the same time they do really, really love each other and they do really want to like be a part of each other's lives. But I do think that can be tricky when I don't know, when you're teenagers and when there are so many emotions and when there's so much happening. And I think there is a lot of hurt in their dynamic too, because Naomi's always very honest with Nathan and like very open with him, and she doesn't feel like Nathan treats her the same way.
I mean, I totally see that. And I even think about, obviously, Daniel, you directed 5 episodes so far, including the mid-season finale, which was obviously dedicated to this chosen family theme. I feel like that's when we saw all the puzzle pieces come together. What did you want the audience to understand about episode 8 as it relates to how we are seeing these characters evolve and grow closer to each other? Which, by the way, can we talk about Lakita Maxwell, Delilah?
I know, insane, right?
Just a moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, because Ben and I have 2 adopted kids, and, we have been thinking about the ways that family come together for decades. And I think that we are now a fully queer household, and both of our kids come from different, birth parents, so that somehow that we ended up miraculously as this like unit, as this like fully queer household, is something that just, it's kind of mind-blowing. I mean, you think about it a lot, like what are all of the sorts of like sets of circumstances and events that kind of come together to create that. And that was something that we wanted to celebrate in the show. I mean, it's explicitly done in the monologue where Ariana, talks in the car about her birth parents, and if they had made it to CBS, then she wouldn't have been born. And there were some elements of that were drawn from our own experience adopting our kids. But the evolution of the whole season and the show is about this family kind of coming together, these kids kind of coming together, and episode 5, which is this, wonderful episode where, the 3 friends kind of go through LA in the day, and then they end up at Anna's apartment, and, kind of coming together as this sort of family. Like, that's the sort of evolution that we wanted to kind of follow. And so we end the mid-season moment with these 2 families coming together. One is, spoiler alert if you have not watched the mid-season finale, but by the way, also shame on you if you haven't watched the mid-season finale, but okay. Anyway, like, in this moment is the birth of 2 families. It is the family that Delilah is creating with her baby, and it is these group of friends kind of coming together. And that's what the last moments of that episode are really about, are about the birth of these 2 families and the sort of the joy and the wonder of that.
I mean, absolutely beautiful. All right, so Nava, I'm thinking about how Anna just plays such a huge role in Greta's life, not even just being her aunt and just being fabulous, but also being, this queer representation of like what it looks like to be confident and to be bold and to also be loved. I also think of how that connects to this time that we're living in. There's so much anti-trans legislation specifically impacting trans youth rights. So why is your character in a show like Generation so important to see right now?
I think that so often what happens in these legislative fights that get played out in the public, that get played out in the press, is that people posit trans people as outsiders. And we are often treated as if we are invading communities, as if we are invading families, as if we are invading spaces. And that is simply not the case. Trans people are part of families. Trans people are part of communities. And I think that's something that we see in Generation, is that Anna is part of this family. She's integral to this group of children who are trying to find their way, and she has wisdom to share. I think that trans people have a lot to offer, and for a very long time have been very underestimated and have been excluded from opportunities that allow us to shine and to offer our gifts. And I think that it means so much to see Anna be able to offer her gifts, and to see the children receive them, even though sometimes Greta is not trying to receive gifts, but Anna will keep on giving. So I think it's really meaningful.
It really is. And I guess for me, do you think that, are we going to get a storyline that is strictly for Anna? Because it feels like there was no major announcement that she is Greta's trans aunt. There really was none of that. And I was wondering, are we going to see that play out? Are we going to get an Anna backstory? Can you spill a little tea for me? Zelda, Daniel, Ben, let me know. I'll go with Zelda first.
I mean, I don't know how much I'm allowed to say about what's coming, but I definitely will say that Anna's character is very, very integral to the second block, and we definitely see a lot more of her.
And one of the great gifts, by the way, of working with actors like the one on this panel and stuff, is that there's a wonderful give and take. And there was, after every script, Nava would come to us and she would and have thoughts about the way that Anna spoke, about her lines. I mean, really, these very specific, I wouldn't use this kind of word, things that are they were so inspiring to listen to. It's just, and Nava opens her mouth and it's pearls of wisdom kind of drop out, at various at points, and that's a kind of a gift to receive. But also just making sure that, that we were giving enough of who Anna was, in these moments to make sure that she was kind of fully rounded. But that is the gift of getting to work with actors like the ones that are on this panel, is that they give you these kinds of ways so that as you're writing and navigating, and then you can think that you can expand and elaborate and let them be as full as you want them to be.
And I just want to throw in there that one of the things that I hope this show does or is able to do is to maybe even speak to the people that you were asking about, Ryan, the people who are afraid, the people who pass this legislation, the people who want to exclude. I think, and even though this is not the purpose of Megan, nor is it the purpose of the show, I do hope that Megan's sort of voice, that her way of thinking is recognized by these people. I hope that it is. I mean, on the off chance, that somebody who would vote for somebody like that is watching this show, I hope that they see that they're not, that this show is trying to make sense of those feelings for them through Megan, through her experience with her husband. Do you know what I mean? And that they might actually go, just for a second. It doesn't have to take longer than that, but that's my hope anyway.
I hope that as well, because I think there's a lot that can be learned from Megan. And now I kind of want to go back to Daniel mentioning you actually saying, looking at the script, being like, I wouldn't say this. That feels like such a bold move, because at times we would hear in the past on Hollywood, especially from a person of color, especially from a marginalized group, doing that, there's a bit of a feeling like, oh, I can't shake the table. So why did you go into this moment with this character specifically, knowing I want to make sure that I'm telling this story correctly of who this person is?
Are you asking that of me or of Nava?
No, that's Nava. I mean, no, sorry, that's Nava.
To my knowledge, I am the first Mexican-American trans woman to ever be a series regular on television, and at least on a comedy series. So that felt daunting to embrace. And that's why I knew that playing Anna was such a special opportunity. And I also recognized that there was so many facets to her identity and to her backstory that it felt very important to bring integrity to that performance. And something that I really kept in mind was her immigrant backstory. I'm from Mexico, but my mom's American, right? And so when I moved to the US, when I was 8 years old, I already spoke English, right? It was a little bit of more of what I call a transnational experience than an immigrant experience. And so I really wanted to honor that backstory of Anna's. And I think that a lot of the notes and the questions and the conversations that Daniel and I had about the script was largely around Anna's language, because I wanted to make sure that we got it right, the bilingualism, the vernacular, because she also has a drag background, which is something else that I don't really share with Anna. I have never done drag before. And so I also had to kind of study and figure out, well, okay, so how does that work? How do all these things come together in how she speaks and how she expresses herself? So it was largely like linguistic, the conversations that we had around Anna and the script. Luckily I majored in linguistics. So I was like, I just like kind of, I don't know, I just already had the knowledge. But I also was so grateful to feel welcomed enough to bring up questions around like, what is this scene supposed to mean, right? And I do remember like there would be like a slight little tweak that kind of added another layer to it. And I think that I just felt that it was so important that this character be given as much as possible because of how monumental it is for representation of Mexican American trans women on screen.
Oh my God. You were lying when you said that every time Nava speaks, you get like goosebumps because it's just incredible. But Daniel, what were you saying?
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, I think it's, because we're dancing with this theme of chosen family. I mean, the other chosen family for, Ben and Zelda and me is this cast and this crew that kind of came together. And we really wanted it to feel like we were this family and then everybody else was kind of an extension of this family. And that as part of it, that there could be this free exchange of ideas and openness and criticism. And I think it was something that we talked a lot about. We talked a lot about in our writer's room about the responsibility when you are telling stories of characters of color to make sure that the actors who are playing them are lending their voices to that and helping us to understand how to make them more real, more dimensional, more authentic. And, we were blessed just not only with like this really warm group of people, but this like vibrant and smart. And you can, like the group of people that could come together and sort of freely tell us like, that's not how I want to say that line. I should say it this way. And like this, and you're like, yes. And thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think that really speaks to what we all fall in love with because it's authentic. The stories feel like, oh, I unfortunately don't know someone that's going through this as Gen Z because Gen Z feels really stressful. I'm not watching a show like this is like, oh, honey, this is birth control for me. But I think I'm so proud of all of you and the show. And I just think about myself growing up in the South and growing up very religious, but like turning on shows like Degrassi and looking at those like queer characters that were on that show and just like relating and being like, a show like Generation takes me back to those moments where I longed for this. And so as we wrap this up, I just want to say thank you so much for each and every one of you and what you're doing. And Zelda, I can't believe that this is how you're getting started with your beautiful career.
Thank you so much. It means so much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of this conversation. I have some good news because on Thursday, June 17th, the second half of the season kicks off with 3 new episodes. So get ready and buckle up because it's just getting started. I'm Ryan Mitchell from GLAAD, and you're watching the OutFronts presented by OutFest. Bye.